Okay, it is 5:02 and we are calling to order the Hampden-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting and public budget meeting. I hope I said that right. Public hearing on the HWRSD F22 budget with questions and answers. As per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A section 20, the public will not be allowed to physically access the school committee meeting. Members of the committee and the public will be able to access the meeting via remote meeting technology, such as Zoom, and the necessary access information will be posted prior to the meeting. The video of the Zoom meeting will be posted on the district's website as soon as possible. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Tom, could you lead us, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, as of 1 hour prior to the meeting, there was no sign up for public comment. So we will go straight into health and safety updates, HWRSD updates, health and safety. Al, take it away.
Thanks, Cheryl. So good afternoon. I just want to give you an update for the return to in-person learning in the Hampden-Wilbraham Regional School District. As you're aware, the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley, was given the authority to mandate the reopening of in-person learning taking place in public schools. And I know Ronnie or Tom, can you just put forward, if you could, please, and I know school committee has it, and we sent that out publicly, the plan for phased return to in-person learning packet. If you could put that on the screen, if available, but if not, I'll just continue to be talking. So there's 3 different phases. The first phase is elementary school, which is grades K to 5, and the start date for the return to in-person is April 5th. Phase 2 is for middle schools, which is grades 6 through 8, and the start date for that in-person instruction to be taking place is April 28th. As you are also aware, in phase 3, is high school, which is grades 9 through 12, which is to be determined in April. We're hearing from the commission that we'll be getting some information shortly, but please know that is not stopping the work that's going to be taking place for the high school to return to in-person as well. As you're also aware, there are only 2 options for families now, either in-person or remote. Thanks to the hard work that we have done as a district, we are prepared to pivot to this next phase of education. So what is happening in our district and how we're preparing for the next phase of education during a pandemic? We have 3 big buckets to talk about that we've been providing information for you since March 13th of 2020. First one is health and wellness, which I have Terry Brand here tonight that's going to give us a little update. Facilities, Ed Senadella has joined us here tonight. In instructional, I have Lisa Curtin representing the elementary schools, and she's going to talk to us at a building-based level. They're going to give us a brief overview of what has taken place in their worlds. What I'd first like to go over with you is the information that we gathered when we reached out to our families from each school to make the decision about in-person or remote. Ronnie or Tom, can we put up the enrollment, the graph? And I believe school committee has it in their binders as well too. Yeah. Yep, please. So as we're waiting for that to pop up, HWRSD enrollment as of April 5th, 2021. And that's basically when we're returning to that in-person.
Yeah.
Got it?
I got it, I'm sharing.
Thank you. Thanks. So this is, survey enrollment information, however we want to use the terminology. I'm going to walk you through this for those people that can't see it. School road, school reentry data. In-person enrollment. Again, this is as of April 5th when we're ready to return in person. Grade 4 for in-person will be 140. Grade 5, there'll be 144 with a total of 284. Cohort D, which is fully remote as of April 5th, there'll be 12 in grade 4, 17 in grade 5 for a total of 29. And just hold on to that number because We know that has the impact of Green Meadows grade 4 and grade 5 as well too. The requested move from hybrid with students that were attending either Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in person to fully remote. In grade 4, there was 0. Grade 5, there were 2, sorry, and a total of 2. A requested move from remote students that were 5 days a week remote to in-person due to the March gathering information. Grade 4, there was 10. Grade 5, 9, a total of 19. Move down to Green Meadows. Again, we're doing from K to 5 right now. Green Meadows will be part of that next transition from grade 6 to 8 when we move the middle school at Wilbraham as well too. But for K to 5, in person right now, as of April 5th, 31. Grade 1, 47. Grade 2, 36. Grade 3, 39. Grade 4, 42. Grade 5, 40, for a total of 235 that will be in person. Cohort D, those are students that will be fully remote. Kindergarten 3, grade 1, 1, grade 2, 1, grade 3, 7, grade 4, 3, grade 5, 2, for a total of 17 that will be completely fully remote. Hybrid to remote, that's again, those are students that were 2 days a week, either Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, that have decided to go full remote. As you can see, Green Meadows, that's 0 across the board. And from remote to hybrid, those are students that were 5 days a week remote and are going now to 5 days a week in person. Kindergarten 1, grade 1, 1, grade 2, 1, grade 3, 1, grade 4, 1, grade 5, 1, for a total of 6. If we could move on to Stony Hill reentry data, and this is as of April 5th. In person, 121 in grade 2. In grade 3, 131, for a total of 252. Cohort D enrollment for a total of 22 for grade 2, 16 for grade 3, and 38 total for cohort D. That will be 5 days a week. They'll be receiving their education remotely. A request move from hybrid. Again, those are students that were 2 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, to fully remote. That's 0 across the board for Stony Hill. A request move from remote, which is 5 days a week, to in-person. Grade 2, 9, grade 3, 9, for a total of 18. Mile Tree reentry data. In-person enrollment as of 4/5/21. Grade K, 99. Grade 1, 124, for a total of 223. Cohort D as of 4/5/21. 19 in kindergarten, 21 in grade 1, for a total of 40. Requested move from hybrid, 2 days a week in person, to remote, 0 across the board. A requested move from remote to hybrid, going from 5 days a week remote to in-person 5 days from the March results at Mile Tree, 1 in kindergarten, 10 in grade 1, and a total of 11. And then there's one other piece that you have in the bottom there, return from homeschool in kindergarten and first grade, I apologize, were 2 students that returned to 5 days a week in person. So let me walk you through, so I have Terry here for as well too. So first of all, any questions on that? And I'm gonna come back to this later on, but this is regarding the information that we see from parents. This went out for a total of a week, and principals gave some further clarification. I know there was a little confusion at the beginning about gathering this information. We did some clarifying on that. And so we're receiving all the information from our families now.
Al, was there anything that surprised you in the numbers?
Not really, Cheryl. I think we were just a little curious about the students that might, or families that might have chose, that might have been hybrid, that wanted to go remote. We knew that was a concern because there were some families that were 2 days a week that were comfortable with that, but were concerned possibly that we heard about 5 days a week and being less than 6 feet. So that was something that was a reason why we did the information we did, gathering that information. So let me have Terry walk.
I have a question after that.
So if Green Meadows is ready to go to 5 days a week, on April 5th. Why are we waiting till April 28th for 6th through 8th?
So what we want to do is do it at the same time that we're doing Wilbraham Middle School. So what I'm going to show you later on is that Wilbraham Middle School will putting their information gathering or their survey out on March 26th, and they'll be taking that time to gather that information. A little bit more complicated at the middle school because we're not just talking about homerooms, we're talking about courses and classes and making sure, and the other part, Patrick, is moving the furniture as well too. So there's a little bit of preparation in getting the entire middle school, and we didn't want one middle school to be moving forward without the other middle school. So we're just trying to keep it all in the same timeline.
All right, I have a quick question now, just for clarification. So the total of people in-person enrollment and cohort D enrollment, those already include the numbers underneath of the 2 and the 19, correct?
I'm sorry, one more time, Sean.
So if you just go to Sewell Road,
Yep.
the entry data,
Yep.
and then you have the 284 in-person enrollment, and then for cohort D enrollment, you have 29.
Yes,
Though the numbers underneath, the 2 and the 19, they're included already.
That's correct.
I
That's
just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
so I'm going to come back to this information. If at this point, I just want to have like Terry and Ed and Lisa walk us through the process that we're going through. So first, I'm going to ask Terry to join us in what has taken place as a district, what we're doing as a community, as we're transitioning back to a hybrid model. Not transitioning back, but transitioning from a hybrid model to in-person or remote. Terry, if I can just ask you to join us, please.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Happy to be with you this evening. So Misty Foss-Trombley is also here. She's a district care coordinator, and I'll have her say a few words about the role she plays to facilitate our contact tracing and surveillance for COVID cases in a moment. So I wanted to let you know that our 2 towns and in fact our county continues to hold their own and make some improvements in reduction of illness cases in the community. Wilbraham had just this week, and that is for a 2-week data that is recorded ending on the 13th and then reported out today. It hasn't hit the dashboard yet. They're always a little bit late, supposed to come out by 5. Usually it's a little after. But I do have their numbers. So there's just a small increase, but the test positivity rate is still less than 2.5%. And Hampden County also improved. So these are all reassuring things that we're doing well as communities, and hopefully we'll continue to do so with increasing vaccination that's going on. For a return to full in-person learning, I just want to let everyone know that really it's all about the strategies that we've been utilizing all along. And we're really going to continue to adhere to all of our risk and health and safety mitigation strategies. So we have plenty of supplies. Ed will probably speak to that as well, but we have plenty of masks if they're needed by anyone on any given day. So we'll continue to be wearing masks properly, and we will have spares for anybody who needs one. We'll probably be installing some additional hand sanitizer stations, but we have plenty of product. We're going to be continuing to encourage distancing and maximizing distancing within our classes to the extent possible, knowing that we have to get a little closer together, possibly down to that 3 feet mark in many rooms to hold the number of students that will be returning to us. But at other times in the day, particularly when it's mealtime, when there's eating going on and masks are off, we're going to have our students distance at the 6 foot. And I know our principals are working very hard with each other and their own staffs to try to determine how to best do that so that we can keep that 6 foot during mealtime. So we have a robust contact tracing and surveillance program in place, and I'm going to let Misty just say a few words about her role with our local boards of health and how we go about that.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So right along since the beginning of the school year, I have been working with both Wilbraham and Hampden Board of Health departments and working closely with the public health nurses and using the state Maven lab reporting system to monitor cases and see how they are connected to our schools, and then supporting our building nurses with that information about whether it's a student or staff or family member of a student that may be positive. And then if we do have a case in school that needs contact tracing, myself and Terry and the nurse in the building work on that to determine who are the close contacts and do those identifications and calling of families to let them know that they've been identified and what guidelines they need to follow in order to return to school safely.
Thank you, Misty. And I think we've been really lucky in our district to have the support of the grant to have a position like Misty. We just have a really robust identification of cases very early on, and then we act on them very quickly. And we're very fortunate to have that in place, and that will continue to serve us well when we have more students in the building and the likelihood of possibly seeing a few more cases. You know, that's yet to be determined how things go across our communities. The other thing I'd like to encourage families to do is to stay informed of the vaccination rollout. The governor's posted all the eligibility dates. Have people continue to monitor the website, get registered on the state platform to seek appointments, which I know requires some diligence. It's not an easy process, but I think it's going to continue to hopefully get a little easier for people, but that will help us all. The more people vaccinated, the best for us all. When we come back full in person, it'll be really important for our staff and our students to stay home. Just like we've said before, if they even have mild illness symptoms, to stay home, get evaluated, seek consultation with their physician and/or get a COVID test before the return to school. That'll be very important so we avoid any unnecessary exposures. And also we're hearing that the travel order is going to change to a travel advisory starting on the 22nd. So we want our families to continue to comply with the travel advisory. All the criteria are still listed exactly the same within the advisory. It's just doesn't have the title order with it anymore, which I'm assuming means people won't be fined. But the governor will still want people to comply with that advisory, and we want our families to as well. And does anybody have any questions for Misty or I?
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Misty. As you've heard me say many times when we've met from last March, the work that Terry has done and the work that Misty has done this year, they've been instrumental in keeping our staff and students safe and doing the close contacting and making sure we're notifying families and staff about it. So thank you, Terry, Misty. I know they're going to stay on as we move into just facilities. Again, our next big bucket when we're talking about when we're talking about our next big bucket is facilities. And I've asked Ed Sonadello, Director of Operations, to join us in the work that he's been doing, not only throughout this year, but the switching over from hybrid to full in-person and remote. Ed, if I can ask you just to speak a little bit, an update.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. When Desi came down with the dates and the new orders, one of the things we immediately did was try to put together a 3-foot spacing room as an example, so that all the principals and admin could really see what it looks like, and what we could see what it looks like. Make sure we had the proper aisles and the safety issues, and it all looks very good. We did a couple of rooms as samples. Typical classroom is about 950 to 1,050 square feet. So we laid the room out in rows, and it looks like we're going to be in pretty good shape in most locations. I understand, and all of admin understands, that we may have 1 or 2 issues at different schools and different rooms that we're going to have to deal with. But I think once we get into the 99th percentile of everything being set up, we can then tackle those. Right now, Sewell Road, all of their equipment and desks are on site, so we're in good shape there. Mile Tree is almost complete. They're about 75% laid out and have their desks ready to go. Stony Hill, we're continuing desk deliveries. We had some on site there, some that we had taken off site, and some additional desks that we're going to need because there were tables in certain rooms. But we have some in storage at a couple locations, some at Thornton Burgess, and I have some still at Memorial. So we're working on that one right now. Green Meadows is about 80% completed. We need to scare up about 10 more desks. I think I know where we can get them. And then that school will be all set. The layouts in all the schools are in pretty good shape. I do have on hand, as far as PPE goes, and plenty of plexiglass to make barriers and plenty of steel to fab the barriers up. We're in the process right now. We've made a number of barriers this week that we've put up. There's some differences now because we're making some for science tables and for art tables and for bigger areas so that we can divide them in 4 and have the safety of a barrier for each student. So right now we've got a prototype that we're going to try. And if everything works, I got the measurements and we're going to start banging those out for everyone.
So Ed, as if I can just jump in for a second. So one of the things Michelle Bedreau and Maura Ryan and I get to spend some time walking around Green Meadows and TWB today. They had an opportunity to really look at what you and your team have done in terms of the plexiglass and the models that you've created for small tables and breaking up our kids and keeping them safe as well too. That is an unbelievable amount of work that you and your team have done and will continue to do. One of the things that we shared with our staff and we're sharing with families that if we need those additional plexiglass, like that's what the work that Ed and his team are doing in preparation for our return on April 5th for elementary schools. The other pieces that Michelle and Maura actually had an opportunity to look at today is the organization, the supply of PPE equipment that we have and ready to make sure that our teachers and staff and students are kept safe. So those are all the things that they had an opportunity to take a look at the work that we've done in preparation for our students and staff to return in person. The last thing is one of the things that teachers have asked us for, and we revisit, and Ed has done it with his team, is whether it's the CO2 readings or the HVAC. Sometimes our teachers are having questions about that, even though we've done that multiple times. If a particular teacher wanted a room reassessed, we're doing that as well too when we're bringing more students back in person. So that's all the work that happens on a regular basis that sometimes Ed just takes for granted that the good work that him and his team are doing. And we couldn't have opened up our schools the way they have without facilities doing the work that they've done. Thank you.
Al, do you think at some point in one of the future meetings we can see one of those reading reports that's supplied? And Ed, how often have you been asked by the teachers or anyone to provide that data?
Just a few times, Maura. We were pretty proactive and got a bunch of readings. I did. Did I share with you some of the Excel file that we have on that? If I didn't, I'm sorry. I've got an Excel file of
I know we
room
talked about it early on with how that was going to work.
Okay.
But I don't think that we've ever seen any readings. I know in the amount of time that the students have been back in school, I don't recall at any of the school committee meetings that's coming up. I'm always happy to see you, Ed, when you come by to visit
Okay.
and give us updates. I will speak and attest to the fact that there is a lot of PPE. The process you guys have in place to get it dispersed is really cool. I mean, it's a very organized process. You guys know where your stuff is. There's pickup points for people to get stuff. So there's no interactions with people, which I think is really good and very safe and health conscious. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks.
So I'm going to move into Lisa Curtin here, and she's just going to give us a little slice of what it's taking at our elementary schools to move. I use that word. We're pivoting because we were in the hybrid. It's work, and it's a lot of work, and it's not only for our building administrators but our facilities and our teachers. I mean, to have this take place in this period of time. there's things that we have to do and things that we have to make sure that we get done and ready and doing it right. So I'm going to ask Lisa if she can just give us a little bit of update what it looks like, and we could certainly have Monique or Shantae or Sharon. And I think today you've had a chance to talk to Sharon Moberg, both Mara and Michelle. But I'd like to ask Lisa to join us and give us a little bit of what's taking place at Sewell Road in preparation for the April 5th return. Lisa?
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you all. We are pretty excited about the opportunity to bring kids back. So as soon as we heard that the rumblings from Commissioner Riley, we started talking and planning of what would we need to do in order to bring students back safely, keep our staff safe. And this is definitely a team-based effort, and especially here at Sewell, I can speak to a team of people, the remote learning team and our climate team, that get together weekly to talk about all these issues and plan things and get input from the rest of the teaching staff and everybody that works in the building. So I'm going to just kind of focus on three different little areas that we've been spending a lot of time talking about. One is the facilities, and Ed mentioned some of that already. We needed to look at how our facilities and our setups needed to change with the new guidelines around, no closer than 3 feet, chair edge to chair edge. What would that look like in the classroom? So we set up a model classroom. We looked at what we could do safely and maintaining that 6-foot distance for the teaching station. I lovingly call it the teaching cockpit. If you've come into Sewell Road and you see the teachers with their devices and their screens and managing their synchronous learning, it's pretty impressive. So we needed to look at the classroom space. We needed to look at and make some decisions about what lunch could look like. Even we're very fortunate here at Sewell. We have a very large building, great floor space, but there's some things we just couldn't really put our heads around in terms of lunch and recess. And that's where the team of teachers came in to kind of run through some of those ideas and talk about how we can make sure that when students are eating, they are 6 feet apart at least, and what that could look like. We needed to develop some newer protocols, and we spent so much time at the beginning of the year coming up with ways to move around the building and how things were going to look from arrival all the way through dismissal. But we needed to look at them again and think about what changes needed to be made when you have perhaps double the number of students in a class. And so teachers have been working on that to, we're thinking about how are we going to get all the kids safely on the bus and making sure that they're moving quickly because, we have to go to 2 other schools to pick up students. So facilities is a big part of it. We're also looking at curriculum, and we have curriculum units. Our teachers have worked tirelessly to adapt and revise curriculum units to fit this synchronous learning model and make sure that students can show what they know, whether they're at home or in person in front of the teacher. So now it's looking at what adaptations do we need to make, if any, to the way students are responding, the way they're accessing some of the materials, and how are we accommodating for students that are in front of us 5 days and those students that will remain remote. We kind of got really excited thinking, gosh, we can kind of reduce the amount of technology that we're using. And now we're thinking about creative ways to continue using technology, but not have students be on a Zoom call all day long, because we've tried not to do that at the elementary level. And we're trying to be creative about how to continue to use technology so students are building those tech skills and accessing the curriculum, but also having time to use paper and pencil and to talk to their person who's, near them in class at a safe distance. So we're doing a lot of talking about the pacing of lessons and getting really excited about essentially having more FaceTime with students and feeling more connected. Our teachers have done a terrific job with the remote learning piece. It's just really hard sometimes to connect and to make something that's confusing clear to a student that's zooming in with you. So teachers are very excited to be able to have students, they can make real eye contact with them. The third thing I want to talk about, and I think it could be the most important thing that we will work on right now, is that social emotional support. So not just at the school level, but at the district level. Our elementary counselors have gotten together and done some planning around lessons. How do we help our very youngest students understand how to manage your excitement about coming back, but also managing your feelings about and your worry, because even our youngest students can have that worry and they hear what's going on in the world. So our counselors have spent some time putting together lessons and coming up with materials and resources to share with the classroom teachers. At the school level, we spent part of our time yesterday on the 17th going through all of those lessons and reteachings that we're going to need to do with our students to help them feel that they know the routines of the class, and the routines won't change, but they'll be revised and adjusted based on the number of students in the class. And when students have those set routines, that they have comfort, and there's comfort and safety in those clear routines. So teachers were coming up with it's almost like those first days of school again, where when you spend a lot of time preparing students and helping them know what you do next and how the day goes. We're going to be doing that again in just a different way with more of our students. We're also spending a lot of time in that community building, because being separate on Zoom, you were part of the community, but it was just different. And so we're kind of embracing this notion that most of us are going to be together now, and we want to be able to really build that community and have this excitement around talking to each other. And teachers are also thinking, how do we continue to make sure that our students in cohort D feel part of that community? How do we keep them engaged with their peers and their teachers? And lastly, in terms of social emotional support, we're planning lessons to help students manage their feelings. You know, they may have conflicting feelings coming into school now. I'm so excited to be at school 5 days, but I'm also really nervous. I hear things that are happening in the world. I want to talk about them. So we'll be doing lessons in group or working with small groups of students about how to deal with your feelings, how to identify them, and how to problem solve. How do you know, what is something to worry about and what's something that we don't need to worry about, because we're following our health and safety protocols. Every day when I do the announcements for students, we talk about, you know, at Sewell Road School, it's important to us to keep people safe. And so we wear our masks, we keep our distance, and we wash our hands. And I tell them every day, you're doing a great job with that. You're following all the protocols. You're keeping us all safe. You can do it. And I appreciate that from our students and from our staff. So we have a lot of work to do to get ready for April 5th. It's like having the big party at your house, and you're, you know, cleaning under the couch and making sure that everything is ready to go. And but there's an excitement. There's teachers, there's kids that are saying, I'm so excited for April 5th. And so aren't we? So thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. We heard that today when we're walking through buildings, how excited kids were for that April 5th return as well, too. I guess, you know, you see the big buckets that we've talked about, the health and wellness, the facilities, and the instruction. I don't want people to think that we're just going to turn the key and be able to return back to school April 5th in person. There's work that still needs to be done, and we will be ready for April 5th. Questions for either Terry, Ed, or Lisa before I actually ask Gina Roy to talk about our students with disabilities and our preschool programs is going to be happening between for reentry as well too. Any questions for Ed, Lisa, or Terry?
Yeah, I have a question for Lisa. For the students that will stay remote for the rest of the year, will they be interactive with the teacher in the classroom, or is that they're going to have their own teacher or such?
That's a good question. At the 4th and 5th grade level, we've been fully synchronous since the end of December, beginning of January. So we are going to continue that in the 4th and 5th grade. So students will Zoom into their classroom and be participating with their class from the arrival time till dismissal time, from 8:30 to 2:45. They'll be Zooming in. Their teacher will be able to interact with them, and then they'll be able to interact with students. We know it's really important that for that morning meeting time that everybody sees everybody's face. So students in the class will be Zooming in and seeing everybody. And then teachers are starting to figure out ways of helping our students that are in cohort G have conversations with the kids in class. So we might be talking about our writing project, and I'm in a breakout room with somebody who's in person at school. So they'll be fully integrated and they'll be part of small groups. And that's the time when the kids that are in school will be joining on Zoom so that we can make sure that we're incorporating our students in cohort D.
The other piece that you might be aware of, that the commissioner, I know I forwarded you that information, is that there's no remote next year. At this point, like, our students are in person next year. The option for this year to be remote had to be done through a survey, which we sort of jumped out ahead of, even the commissioner coming out and getting information from our families about the option to have remote. So any other question? I know I'm just trying to keep an eye on the time for Terry, Ed, or Lisa, because I do want to have Gina, and I have a little bit more to give about in my presentation.
Al, how are the individuals that were remote teachers being redeployed? Is that redeployed supporting education, or is that a cost savings coming to the budget?
So a couple of things, Patrick. If you see that there's still a need to have remote teachers, right? So there's a group of families and children that have chose to opt to be still remote when you're looking at the K, first and second grade. So we're still going to be using them. The other part is we have a couple other teachers that will be supporting others, either in small group instruction, or if we have some of our remote teachers that are out for the day, K1, 2, that they'll be supporting that as well too. But there's still a need to have remote teachers based on the numbers that families that want to still be remote at that primary grade.
Yeah, but what about next year?
Next year, we're not going to have remote, and next year will be fully in person. So we will not be having those remote positions in place for next year.
So I don't want to speak for you, Patrick, but I think that may have been what he was asking about, because you have teachers that are remote now.
It's this year. So then, to the comment Lisa just made, how are the 4th and 5th grade remote teachers, how have they been redeployed since it became a synchronous scenario and they weren't necessary to support 4th and 5th grade learning?
And I can speak, and Lisa is certainly on this, but remember that those teachers that were our remote teachers in those grade 4 and 5 were actually our instructional coaches. So they're back working and doing that curriculum, back doing the work that they were supposed to be doing starting in September, and getting the curriculum written for our district, as well as providing for support for our teachers as well. Lisa, you want to jump in on that at all, or did I sum that up for you?
I think you summed it up there. We did have a few other remote teachers early on. That one Title I teacher that we kind of pulled and used to support remote, who has returned back to Title I in the rightful position that she needed to be in. And then we were able to take another remote teacher and move them to another area where they needed to be at a lower level. So kind of the numbers were such that we needed more remote teachers at the lower level, and we were able in 4th and 5th grade to be able to offer those up because we were able to go fully synchronous.
So Gina, if you could just walk us a little bit through our students with disabilities, what's happening with them, and also regarding our preschool, when they will be returning back to 5 days a week in person as well too.
Sure. So at previous meetings, I've mentioned quite a bit that our intensive needs students have a really difficult time accessing remotely. So we've arranged for starting on the 24th for these students to be half day in person. So it'll be the 24th and the 31st. So for K to 5, they're going to change into full 4 days, full day. But the 6 through 12 intensive needs program, we're going to keep that going, and we're going to have those students continue to come in half days on Wednesdays, just so that they can get the support they need to make progress. So that's pretty much the report out on the intensive needs. For the preschool, the commissioner didn't give much guidance as far as going full 5 days for pre-K. We decided that it would be best to wait until the week after the K to 5 went to 5 days full in person. And so we're going to start the preschool at 5 days in person the week of April 12th. So just 1 week later. And Al has already sent out correspondence to all the pre-K parents regarding this.
And to Gina's point, we have received no guidance at all regarding preschool. So we felt like we're ready to go back. We've heard from our preschool families that they want 5 days a week, but we want to make sure we're doing this right. So we're bringing our kindergarten all back in on, April 5th, and we just wanted to give a little bit of a delay to make sure we have those in place, busing, transportation, dismissal, before we brought the preschool. And so it'll be a week later, and they'll start 5 days a week.
Well, I think the commissioner has given mixed signals with this, because he said that K and up will wear masks, but he said that there will be everyone in the school buildings must wear masks. And our pre-K are in the school building. So he's giving signals.
Cheryl, to that point, the MASC came out and released a new updated version of the face coverings policy, which we'll review. I'll bring it to Michelle and we'll review during policy sub, because they're also requiring that everybody in the building has face coverings.
Well, that's what came from the commissioner this last week.
Yeah.
That policy.
So if I can move on, couple of things. Middle school, grade 6, 7, and 8, enrollment data will be reaching out to families starting the week of March 26th, gathering that information. Again, it's a little bit more complicated at the middle school level. So we're not just talking about homerooms, but we're talking about sections and courses and making sure that in this one particular class, there might be 19 kids that are coming back. But yet in this class, what does it look like? So it's a little bit more complicated, but we'll be moving on that for March 26th, and we'll be ready for our reentry of in-person as well too. Next school committee meeting, I'm going to ask John DeRozier, and I had a conversation with him today. He'll be joining us at school committee, sort of like what Lisa just did. He'll walk us through what middle school will be looking like, and I'll have Sharon join us. The other piece that I'll be having you get an update on at the next school committee is Julie Dougal and her world of feeding. That's a huge piece. One of the things that you might have heard Lisa mention, and every one of our principals, the concern is about how we're feeding our students, keeping that social distance and keeping the 6 feet, and being able to provide all of our students lunches as well too. So at our next school committee meeting, I'll have both John and Julie here to give a little bit of update what's happening in their worlds.
We also have an update on the middle school at Green Meadows.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought I said Sharon. If I didn't, I'm sorry. I'll have both Sharon and John come back and report as well. Thank you. High school, Steve, Terry, Ed, and myself are meeting on Tuesday. We're moving forward to what's going to be taking place at the high school. Again, there's to be determined from the commissioner, but that's not stopping our district in the work that Steve's going to do at the high school, and what we're going to do as a district in reentry of our students at the high school as well too. I think the one thing I just really want to make sure that people understand is, so we are reopening our school, and you'll get this in my my weekend communication that goes out every week. And just because we're opening up our schools and we're opening up to our students and we're opening up 5 days a week, there's still going to be that I need to make clear to the community, and that, like I said, will come out in my communication, is we're not opening up our campuses. And what that means is, I know one of the things we take great pride in is parents coming into our schools and in field trips and PTO events at the end of the year. Our job for the remainder of this year is to educate our kids, but at the same time, keeping our kids safe and keeping our staff safe. So I'm putting a hold on that open campus, right? So families aren't still going to be able to come and go in our buildings. Like, we're going to continue the work that we've been doing since the beginning of the year. There's no, the PTO events. I'm already getting requests for those great events that we have at the end of the year. But right now, we still want to make sure we're keeping our kids and staff safe. And the same thing goes along with field trips. If guidance changes, right? So one of the things that, we're talking about at the high school, and we've talked about in every high school principal and every superintendent, graduations, proms, and all those things, we still haven't received guidance on that. So when that happens, I will continue to keep you updated on that. But if we're going to open, and that is our goal and the dates that we have, we want to make sure that we're going to do this safely for our students and our staff, and we're going to do it the right way. But there's still information coming. We're hearing that the CDC might be changing their guidelines from 6 feet to 3 feet based on the study that took place in Massachusetts. I'm waiting to hear more information about that for meals and lunches and social events as well too. But until then, our schools are going to be open. We're going to be educating our kids. It's not going to look like those rooms that you looked at when we first, maybe a year ago, were walking into it, all the extra and all those wonderful things that our teachers do. We're going to have desks in there. We're going to have chairs in there. We're going to have our students in there. We're going to have our teachers in there and delivering their instruction in person until the remainder of this year, to keep everybody safe. So I just want to make sure that people understand that. And like I said, that will all come out in my communication on this weekend. Questions for me, for Terry, for Ed, for Lisa, for Misty.
Sorry, Al, when do you think we'll see something with regard to some of the fast testing and things, to see where some of these students are?
Sure.
Where they're kind of falling?
Yep. So you saw that even today we didn't get to walk in some of those rooms because they were doing some testing, fast testing. They were doing some A testing as well too. So we can get you some of that data as it's rolling through. It's taking place. Even when we walked into Julie Keefe's remote classroom, she was doing some assessments online as well too. So we'll get you some of that information. Yes, I can get that for you. Let my teachers finish doing their work as well.
Yep.
Any other questions regarding that?
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your updates. Okay, so right now we're going to switch to Michelle Emergian with some policy subcommittee. We have 4 policies, I believe, that are ready for the final reading. Take it away, Michelle.
Oops. Oh, there. Thank you. Yeah, so this would be the 3rd reading of these policies that we actually decided back in November 12th, to bring to the full committee. It is IHBEA, which is English learner education, JB, which is equal educational opportunities, JBB, educational equity, and JF, school admissions. So this would be the 3rd reading of them, and I would be asking the committee for a motion to approve the acceptance of these 4 policies.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Michelle B,
Aye.
Michelle E,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
and me, aye. That is unanimous. Those are approved. Thank you, Michelle.
And we will continue to bring you policies. We're meeting once a month, the 2nd Thursday of every month, and we will meet again, I believe it's April 8th, and we will continue to bring you policies.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Michelle before we move on? No? Okay, so future agenda items. Please, as you listen to these, if there's other agenda items you want in on the future meetings, let us know. Strategic plan, the equity audit, the 21-22 school choice recommendations, and Minnetonka Regional High School Diversity Club will be presenting, I believe, the next committee meeting.
Actually, Cheryl, I would like to just get on our radar, maybe having a discussion about what worked and what didn't work, during this whole COVID, crisis from the beginning to now. And really have a discussion about, what good can we pull out of this for everyone, for the teachers, for the students, for the administration. So I'd like if that could be added and we could just keep that on the back burner until we're ready to have that discussion.
Kind of an after hours assessment.
Yeah, after action review.
After.
Cheryl,
Okay.
just one clarity on the diversity club. I know Patrick asked that and they're excited. Kelly is, excited to come in and do a presentation. We're hoping that it'll be maybe at the next school committee meeting, depending on what taking place with the reentry. But we have that scheduled after the budget was over, that they would either come in a future school committee
Okay,
meeting.
so
So I
this
just
is,
don't want them to be nervous thinking that I've already lined that up. We've had a conversation, but that is absolutely on our agenda, hopefully in April.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. All righty. We will be doing the public hearing on the FY22 budget with questions and answers, but it is scheduled for 6 o'clock, so we will take a brief break.
So not that I'm trying to fill time, if I could just go along with that.
Well, I guess we won't take a brief
Just for
break.
2 minutes.
You told me we were gonna take a
I know,
brief
I'm
break.
sorry. I just want to,
5-minute break, Cheryl. What? Yes, I skipped right over that. I am so sorry. We have approval of warrants for the consent agenda, so
Thanks.
make sure you sign them before you leave today.
and the other thing I wanted to say is, yes, there was a professional learning day for us in the district. We had some diversity training, professional learning take place. I think we got to hear this today, and we heard yesterday from our families, from our teachers and staff, how great it was and how meaningful it was. We had everyone in the entire community participate, high school, middle school, elementary school. They did a great job. Great conversations were taking place, but a lot more to take place. Like I said to the community yesterday, it's the tip of the iceberg of work that we need to do, which will lead right into the equity audit that I know is part of your agenda that we're working on as well too. But there is work to be done, but there was great conversations that took place at all levels. I was only able to participate at the elementary middle school part in the afternoon, but it was, as you heard today, it was just really well received and they did a great job.
Yeah, and I was struck by the 4 policies that we just put into motion. One of them was the educational equity, and in it states that we need a strategic plan that also reflects educational equity. So the state is moving on that too.
Thank you. That's all. I just wanted to make sure. You can go to your break now.
Okay, we have a 5-minute break. We will reconvene at 6 o'clock. It is 6 o'clock and we are going to start our budget roundtable, our budget presentation. Aaron Osborne, our Director of Finance and Operations, will be conducting this walk through the budget. Take it away, Aaron.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I think for a number of you, this will feel somewhat redundant. We've shared a lot of the same slides in a number of meetings. I believe we shared this at the budget roundtable last week. So those of you who have been at those meetings, you know, I understand if your eyes roll back in your head a little bit. There is one new slide, so we do have a bonus feature. So we'll call this the much anticipated Osborne cut of the budget. Those of you who get that joke know that today is the release of the Snyder Cut of Justice League. And if you're as excited as I am and sad to be missing it. So when we finish with the presentation, we're going to offer the opportunity for a question and answer period. The committee can, of course, ask questions through directly verbally. And you will see I have just posted in the chat that folks should, interested in asking questions or making comments, should write in chat, including your full name, your address, and your question and comment. Ronnie or I will field those questions in the order they're received, and we'll do our best to respond accordingly. If somehow we miss your question or comment, just let us know. I'm sure they're going to be coming hot and heavy, and we're going to have a plethora of them, so it may become challenging.
So Aaron, the chat question should be solely on the budget, correct?
Yes, solely on the budget, yes. So thank you, Ronnie, for having it up. So today is March 18th, in fact, so we can move on. Many of you are aware that this year's budget, in addition to the normal sort of shifting of students that's been happening over a period of time, and we'll get into that, had a special sort of curveball thrown at it, and that is the minimum local contribution. So when we figure out the budget and we determine who pays what for the budget between Hampden and Wilbraham, each town pays something called the minimum local contribution first. And then the remaining money is more or less put into a pool and split according to student count. The interesting part is the minimum local contribution isn't based on student count. It's based on each town's ability to pay and a number of various factors, including property values and the town's income. So for this coming year, Wilbraham's minimum local contribution did drop slightly. It dropped $13,000. You can see that on the screen, from $16,700,000 to $16,686,585. However, Hampden's minimum local contribution dropped very significantly. It dropped $269,672. So basically, this pot of $283,111 has moved from that minimum local contribution that each town pays first and into that pool that's split by student count. And Ronnie, if you move to the next slide, we will talk about what that really means. So with that 283,000, That is now split 80%, 20%, very roughly. So Wilbraham has roughly 80% of the students. Hamden has roughly 20% of the students. So the towns absorb the following amounts. Wilbraham absorbs 226, 489,000. Hamden 56, 622. So when we net those out with the decreases each town has already had, so Wilbraham picks up 226,489, less the 13,439 in reduced minimum local contribution. They have a net increase before we start doing another thing, before we figure out a percent increase, level service, before we figure out student counts. Their net increase is 213,000 straight off the top. Hamden, by comparison, has the 56,000 less their $269,672 decrease in minimum local contribution. And that nets them a decrease of exactly what Wilbraham's increase was, $213,050 before we even look at anything else in the budget. So this is sort of a really challenging starting point. You've got the starting line for this race at very uneven places. And it is just the reality of the funding formula that the state uses. I don't have any better exciting commentary to make on that than it's based somewhat on property values and incomes. So Ronnie, we can move to the next slide. So as we start putting together the budget, we start talking about what are some of our priorities. And Wilbraham, before I arrived, had some community budget priorities that they had set. And we felt that these were pretty good priorities that we wanted to share with the community, and we felt like continuing made sense. So the very first is, of course, support the district's vision and commitment to excellence. I think we all want excellence. It's something we all strive for. And that's something we want to embed in the budget. Prioritize strategies and programs with proven cost effectiveness. As I go through the presentation, you'll see a couple areas where I specifically reference it. We're taking on some activities, and we've made some activities over the past few years where we've invested in the future as a district. When I say we, I largely mean other people because I wasn't here for some of those originally, but you get the drift. We also want to recognize student class sizes. We need to understand that really priority 1 is somewhat driven by priority 3 here, that student class sizes are really essential to maintaining a high quality education. All of the research shows that class sizes are very, very important to student learning. And finally, we want to have manageable town assessments. We want our towns to be partners with us, and we want to be partners with the towns, and we want to work to make those assessments reasonable and keep them consistent. Again, that's where that minimum local contribution situation becomes a challenge. So we'll go to the next. This year, the leadership team sat down, and these are some budget priorities that might typically be in a strategic plan. Now, I know we're working on a strategic plan, so what we did is we sat down and we said, well, what are our district priorities? What are the things that we want to make sure that we keep no matter what, right? What are the most important things in our budget? The very first item we came up with was to continue the technology gains we made. You'll see a number of references to that throughout this presentation. That includes things like the one-to-one programming. That means a lot of the software that teachers have been using. It also means utilizing things, maybe not to as great an extent, but like conferencing, Zoom. We've used Zoom very successfully. And how do we continue to integrate those tools in the work we're doing, whether it's in classrooms or in offices, to bring people together? A lot of us have talked about how some of these Zoom meetings we're able to have very quickly are even more effective sometimes than an in-person meeting, right? In some cases. And then finally, we want to focus on our student social and emotional well-being. Many of our students have been out of school for a very long time. Some of them are in fully remote, some of them are in hybrid. Many of them are struggling emotionally. They don't see their friends. Their sports seasons were canceled or cut short. or cut into, and it's played havoc on a lot of our students. We also have a lot of students who are homeschooled this year, who are then going to have to integrate back into school after a year of homeschooling. Other students who've chosen to go with one of the various virtual academies throughout the district. We'll talk a little bit about that later as we talk about choice and charter. Next, we need to look at and start to close those COVID achievement gaps. So when we're talking about excellence, right? When we have a really wide range of student functioning after this pandemic, we really need to be able to identify and start to close them. And you'll see some items in the budget where we speak to that very directly. And then finally, we really want to expand our understanding of equity. One of the items I think leads back straight to item 1 on this is when we went fully remote and we were forced to go one-to-one. We bought thousands of Chromebooks and we made sure that every student had a Chromebook or some sort of device that allowed them to access the curriculum. So that is a component of equity, making sure that every student has access regardless of their socioeconomic situation, their home situation, what have you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going. So let's dig right into the budget. So our proposed fiscal 22 budget is $50,281,358. That represents an increase of $985,909 and is just about 2%. When we look at that budget, the best way to think of it is this is largely a level service budget. Level service is always a challenge. Needs are always increasing. And a level service, a lot of people will say that level service really backslides you a little bit, but we're going to do our best to minimize that backslide, and we've done a few things, and you'll see those in the presentation. It also includes a strategic swap of some funding through the central office. If we can scroll back just a little bit, yep, through the central office and some positioning that we're going to put into some resources, and I'll talk about that a little later. Okay, Ronnie, we can go next. So whenever we put together a budget, we have some items that are simply obligatory cost increases. Really, we are, we're obligated to pay them. So health insurance, we all know that health insurance goes up significantly year on year. We have actually had a pretty reasonable year this year, even in a pandemic, with our increase. Scantic Valley, our provider for health insurance, so we're part of a regional self-insured trust, and they've kept those figures to about 5%. So our increase is certainly below what we were worried it might be, and we're very happy for that. Hampden County Retirement has a pretty solid increase of $160,000. I won't comment on things in the press, but that's really a pretty typical retirement increase. I believe it was around 8% on that item. We do have contractual increases, so we have a number of union contracts that have increases built into them. Each one of those contracts, I think, is in the 3rd year of a 3-year cycle. And so those contractual increases that's a combination of contractual increases through that. Plus, we've had a few retirements during the year, which end up providing a few cost savings. So it's a net of those contractual increases and some salary savings through retirements. And finally, the next item of sort of size is transportation. And this is actually a very good number relative to our total transportation cost of $85,000. LPVEC is our transportation provider. Because of some of the decreases in utilization last year and some of the decreases going into this year, they've been able to keep their increase for this coming year low. We also have, you will see, a $150,000 credit from them that we anticipate receiving that we will apply towards next year's budget. We think that's a responsible use of that money. It is a one-time, but we do feel like that's a good use of that sort of one-time gain. Ronnie, maybe the next slide. Get to a total of 1.4 million. Sorry, I jumped the gun there. Of increases. We get into projected cost savings. The next piece we look at is how much can we save this year? So we do have that transportation credit. It is a bit of a one-time credit, but we also recognize that we've underused this year our contract, and LPVEC probably next year will be able to minimize their increase in talking to them and understanding the situation that they're in. We do have some savings in out-of-district placements. This is one of those investments that we talked about a while back. You may recall that we added some in-house programming, and that helped us keep some students in district. It also allowed us to bring some students back from out-of-district placements. In our mind, our students always are better served living and going to school in their own communities. So we think this is really a win-win when we can bring kids back from an out-of-district placement in a responsible manner, so that it's in the best interest of them and in the best interest of the schools. Next, we are using some grants to help offset some items strategically. One of those is summer programming, and another is some building maintenance costs. And that's where, when we talk about some of the PPE requirements, the plexiglass screens we're talking about and things like that, that's where a lot of that funding will come from. We also are making HVAC improvements. So we are using the higher grade air filters. That does put a higher strain on our HVAC systems. So it leads to more energy consumption, and we do have to recycle those filters more frequently. So we will use some of that funding to help. We do have some increases in our special education and our Title I grants that are helpful. Those are largely due to increases in those areas though. So as we have increased needs in special education and increased needs in Title I, which is low income, those grants go up accordingly, right? Based on that. So we'll talk a little bit in my added slide. I figured we'd talk a little bit about that quickly. And then finally, we do have a small reduction to FTE, which is our total full-time employee status of about 1.26, resulting in roughly $50,000 worth of savings. And that is not a RIF. We're not cutting anyone's job. These are unfilled vacancies that we will not have to fill next year. They're positions that are sitting vacant. And then when we sat down and we went through budgets and we shook out what the needs were, these pieces of positions kind of fell out. Some part-time positions were combined into a full-time position, and other things like that. So that gets us to a total of $453,359 in net savings. These are the larger items. There are some small items up and down throughout the budget, but these are the items that are the most impactful. So Ronnie, we can move to the next slide. So what are some of the key budget provisions as we talk about what are the things we're going to try to get done and make sure happen? So the very first thing we're going to do is utilize our COVID grants. We have some COVID grants coming in, and we have already put in for those grants. We've also already received the funding, and we are authorized to start spending on those grants immediately. The very first thing we're going to do is we are going to support our one-to-one initiative for both fiscal 22 and fiscal 23 through those grants. So I have put aside funding through speaking with principals, speaking with our tech department about potential needs, and understanding what our utilization for the next couple of years might be on things like Chromebooks and devices. So we've secured that funding. We do need to start launching into some conversations about if this is going to be a long-term priority for us, then we need to find the funding for this. And that's a commitment I've asked for from our leadership, is that as we go through the next few years, we need to start shaking things out and determine if this truly is our priority, then we need to determine some sources for this funding. And this fits exactly with District Priority 1, right? This is exactly continuing those technology gains we've made. The next item we're going to do is once we add all of these devices, and we've already added them, our district IT staff, and thank you guys are fantastic. Bill and his team have done yeoman's work this year. And it would be really detrimental to not recognize that and not understand that if we're going to add this level of devices to our network and to our fleet, that we need to add some staffing. So we have swapped out a portion of last year's ELL increase, as well as some central office savings. And we have put that into an additional tech support position. I'm working with Bill Powers, our tech director, to determine exactly what the role of that person will be. And I know Bill is speaking with his staff and discussing how they can best utilize that resource. But that, again, fits district priority number 1. If we're going to have that level of device, we need to have that level of service following those devices, right? So next, we are going to use our limited grant and credit support to keep our budget to 2% and offset that MLC hit. We are hopeful that the degree of magnitude of that minimum local contribution hit is somewhat temporary, and we'll really only find that out next year. This really fits with priority 4. We have worked with the town of Wilbraham and with Hamden to make sure that their assessments are in line with money that they can come up with. Wilbraham's finance committee has met and agreed to support our budget. So we feel really happy and thankful to them for their support and all the work they've done. And then additionally, knowing that we're going to have students coming back with academic challenges and with social emotional challenges, we're going to use some of that money as a temporary stopgap to help support interventions, social emotional equity and efficiency needs of the district. So when I say that, on the budget for the grant we've already received, we have some interventionist salaries, we have adjustment counselor salaries, and we have community outreach salaries. So those are positions, they'd be one-year positions that would be built into that grant to support students returning and meeting their unique needs at all levels. So right now, this would be fiscal 22, and this would be entirely off budget, right? It would not impact this budget, but this absolutely meets priorities 2, 3, and 4, right? Social, emotional, academic, as well as equity. We're also looking at the equity audit we've talked about as part of that grant funding. And we are also looking at some efficiency opportunities through some workflow enhancements. And we can talk about those at another time. I'm excited to talk about those once we have a chance to dig a little deeper. Oh, and I was about to go a page down, but Ronnie can go a page down for me. Thank you, Ronnie. And so what's the impact of student enrollment? So this is a conversation that comes up frequently, right? We have dropping student enrollment and we have shifting student enrollment. So we have had numbers lost. And Ronnie, if you want to go through the next slide, over the past 10 years, we've seen, if you can scroll down a little bit more, Ronnie, so people can see the legend. So the light orange line you will see is a change in our number of students. So our number of students has dropped. I believe this graph shows 3,600 to just under 3,000. So in this period of time, we've lost about 600 students. At the same time, you'll see, despite some spikes in fiscal 2008 to fiscal 2011, we have consistently received a little bit more Chapter 70 each year. And as many of you know, our budget has continued to go up, and a lot of people will ask the very obvious question of why do we continue to need more money despite the fact that our budget is going up? And that lends very much into student needs. From fiscal 2008 to fiscal 2019, our economically disadvantaged population increased from 5.1% to 15%. That represents an enormous increase. And if we go to the next slide, Ronnie, this is the exciting news slide, and I realize it's busy. Okay, this is a very busy slide, but what I want you to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom, Ronnie, if you could. So these are the changes in total percent increase in our economically disadvantaged population. So going back to 2008, Hamden-Wilbraham had an economically disadvantaged population of 5%. Today, we have an economically disadvantaged population of over 20%. That is a gain of 15%, a full 15%. And if you look across the board, I chose some neighboring towns as well as the state number just to compare. This isn't a fluke, this is statewide, it's region-wide. The number of economically disadvantaged students in our schools, in our state has been increasing steadily for years, right? Regardless of anything else, right? This is a pretty straight line increase. You know, I'm sure people could draw a spike to maybe some economic challenges, but this is really a pretty straight line. You do get up to 2020 to 2021, and if you look at that jump, that is a full 4% in every single town and the state. So if you go from fiscal 2020 to fiscal 21, we go from 16 to 20%. The state goes from 32 to 36%. Longmeadow goes from 7.5 to 10.5. East Longmeadow goes from 18 to 22, and Ludlow goes from 27 to 31. So literally every single town around us and the state has gone up by pretty close to 4 full percentages. And that is significant. That's a significant change. If you look at the side note, I did some research. I knew that economically disadvantaged students come with some additional cost. If I were to guess, I might have guessed 20%. This study by Syracuse references at 41%. So the average cost of an economically disadvantaged student is roughly 41.5% higher than that of a typical regular education student. When you're factoring in special education students, it's 21% above the existing factor for special education costs. So when we're thinking about costs, we really have to think about the fact that over this amount of time, our costs, our education costs have gone up precipitously during this time. I didn't want to just accept this Syracuse study blindly. I also referenced a study by the California Budget Project. So another state, another coast, that estimates the economically disadvantaged of at least 30% more than other students independent of cohorts. So if you sort of take that 40% and 20% from regular ed and special education, you combine those, that really comes to a net 30%, right? If you round those out. So I think both the Syracuse study and the California study that I believe was in 2014, so more recent. So this is one example of where our costs that we really can't control are coming from. You also saw that our health insurance went up by 5%. You also saw that some of our pension obligations went up by 8%. These are all costs that are challenging to control and are embedded within our budget. So, you know, not every economically disadvantaged student results in that much additional cost, but this is an average, and we think about this in the aggregate. It's important to think about. Ronnie, can we go to the next slide? Oops, Ronnie? Oh, there we go. So low income and other challenges aside, we also have to contend with the reality that assessments are shifting. They've been shifting for a while. One of the big challenges is they've shifted pretty quickly over the past 6 years. So there's been a full 5% shift in assessments between Hamden and Wilbraham. between fiscal 16 and what will be fiscal 22. So this 6-year trend went from 75%, 25%, Wilbraham at 75%, Hamden at 25%, to Wilbraham at 80% and Hamden at 20%. That coupled with the minimum local contribution change is part of what represented the really significant challenge for Wilbraham this year. So we can go on to the next, Ronnie. Thank you. And so the next item we have to think about is, what do our revenues look like, right? So what our budget's going to look like is a net of our revenues less our costs at the end of the day. So let's take a look at some of our revenue assumptions. So obviously we have assessments, but we also have some other pretty significant components of our budget. The biggest is Chapter 70 aid. And our Chapter 70 aid comes to roughly $12 million. And as a large component of our budget, if you look at how that Chapter 70 has increased over time at 0.5% per year, that represents a pretty challenging increase. That means the town's assessments are going to have to make up for any difference. So when our budget goes up by 2%, the towns are having to pick up a larger share of the budget. So that feeds into a little bit of the existing problem. You'll also see transportation aid, right? As costs go up, that transportation aid is going up by 0.03% per year on average. So that is basically a 0% increase year on year. Again, the difference in any increases end up needing to be picked up by the towns. Then we get to our net choice and charter. I believe, and I know that some of this number, you'll see a very large decrease in fiscal 22, and we've had to absorb that in the budget. And this is one reason I am kind of willing to offset some of our costs with one-time items. Is a big piece of this shift in choice and charter is students who for this year opted to go to one of the 2 virtual schools. So there is a virtual school based out of Greenfield, that's the Mass Virtual Academy. And then there's TECA, which is another virtual school out of the East Coast, Eastern Mass. I don't remember exactly where they're out of. But we've had a pretty significant increase in students there this year. And the other reality is those students do cost more than typical choice students. I believe for this year, they're costing us $8,700 per student. So a normal choice student would cost us $5,000. So when you sort of couple the increase in students plus the higher cost of those students choicing out to those programs, we get to a pretty big increase in our choice out. There is also a moderate increase to our charter out. It's sort of an indication of what's been happening for a long time on charter, with charters expanding and growing over a number of years. And then you look at some of our grants. As I mentioned, some of our grants have been increasing, right? As our low income has increased, our Title I grant has increased. Our special education costs have increased slightly, but if you look at the total of that special education grant, it really seems to have trended at or maybe a little below what our anticipated increases in special education might be. So then I wanted to look at what are the total changes, but then I also, knowing that this choice and charter situation may only be 1 year, I wanted to kind of remove that from the equation as well and give a quick eyeball at what that might look like. But when you look at $14,700,000, you know, even taking out choice and charter, that large component of what kind of fills big parts of our budget is really going up by only a little over 0.5%, with an understanding that the increases to Title I and the increases to our special education grant represent true increases to costs. Those do track with what our needs are. So it's important to think about that and realize that when we're asking our towns for more money, that money we're asking for is more than it would be if we had more resources from the state or requisite resources from the state. So we can move on to the next slide. So some of the aid assumptions I've talked about, I have talked about. So again, the Title I and IDEA are representative of increases to those programs. One of the things to realize is that we are in what's called a hold harmless position in regards to our Chapter 70. Chapter 70 funding is very much related to your student counts. And when you looked at that gap in the graph a few slides ago, that gap between those two trend lines is our hold harmless gap. So some people will say in communities in Western Mass, and this is happening across Western Mass, Hamden Wilbraham is not unique. They will say, well, if only we had more students, we would need more than 800 more students probably to see a dime of additional funding in Chapter 70. So, you know, as much as we welcome more students and we'd love to have more students for the sake of having more students, one of the ongoing challenges is we're now in a situation where it could be economically challenging if all of a sudden we were to have a lot more students. So again, that small increase account for more than 25% of our revenues as a whole. So that's a very challenging position to be in. And then finally, one of the things I wanted to say is that we made a decision to hold the support we take out of our school choice account each year to support the budget. We held that at 600,000 despite a decrease in anticipated revenues. So the choice and charter out is factored into our budget. So again, that's, like I said, that's hopefully going to be a one-time, or it will ameliorate over the next couple of years. But we, in order to help the towns and make sure that this budget was amenable to them, we wanted to help hold that choice support consistent. And I think it's important to do. This is going to be a one-time fluke, we hope. It's going to be short-term in terms of the additional choice out costs. We'd like to recognize that and not hit the towns with another big spike in assessments. Next slide, please. So this is just sort of a pie chart of where our revenues come from. And you can see Chapter 70, transportation, choice tuition, Medicaid, some interest income, and the applications of some E&D do paint a pretty significant piece of the budget. We also have the Wilbraham and Hamden assessments, which are crucial to filling the budget. But that Chapter 70 and all of the other items are also very significant players in the budget. So we can go to the next slide, Ronnie. So then what are assessments going to look like for 2022? So the total primary assessment for Hamden is $8,269,080. And it's made up of the various decreases and increases that you see below. So the total net to their primary assessment is $41,947 to the negative. So they're seeing a negative 0.5% to their primary assessment. And then there is some debt on Green Meadows School that I believe ends this year. In fact, I know it ends this year because we met with the advisory group and they were all very clear that it ends this year. Regardless, but I do know it ends this year. But that does also decrease this year by $7,200. So we can scroll down to the next slide, Ronnie. And then we get into Wilbraham's assessment. And so when we talk about the increase that they're looking at, their total primary assessment is $26,269,034. And that's made of that decrease to minimum contribution and many of the other items you see below. Their regional debt assessment, both towns' regional debt assessments drops a little bit. Our payments are getting a little bit better with time. And they have a total change of $975,693 for a net increase of that almost 4% that I discussed earlier, 3.71%. And I do want to thank the town of Wilbraham again. They worked really hard and worked with us back and forth repeatedly And again, their finance committee has supported this budget and this increase. So thank you. Next slide. And so finally, what's the total of the assessments? You're looking at them here. When we get down to the end of the day, those are our assessments. And Ronnie, next slide. Thank you. That will be the end. I am happy to take any and all questions from the school committee or the community as you see fit. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone who, you know, I know that maybe my style wasn't exactly what everybody did in the past. I usually take budget more conversationally. We have sit-down meetings rather than formal presentations and things like that. My methodology will change with time as well. I want to work with people. If people prefer doing presentations, we can work on that for next year. You know, one of our ongoing challenges is there wasn't any additional money, you know, so we were really trying to claw on to not having to make cuts and keeping at least level service. And so when all was said and done, I know a lot of principals and departments had some asks. And had we had the funding to provide some asks, we would have had a more maybe robust conversation about those items. But bear in mind also, if we had to make some hard cuts, we would have also had to have those discussions. So you take a little bit of the good, you take a little bit of the bad, and hopefully we come up even. And I think that's where we ended up this year. So thank you.
Any questions from school committee at all?
Well,
I don't see any questions in the chat as well
none.
either.
You know, one of the nice things about the way that we've done this budget over the last few years and it's evolved is that, you know, a lot of the questions that people have already been answered. And so I think the process is great. It still we still can find room for improvement. But it's nice that none of this information is coming as a shock to people. So, Aaron, nice job with the presentation.
Thank you.
And I'm the one that's monitoring the chat. I don't see any questions. So
Bill, I've got a couple questions.
Okay,
sure.
And I don't think they're major things. It's more minor that between when we saw this last and now. So the first one has to do with the central office. So I think one of the things that we really focused on last year was ensuring that we had as many people in student-facing positions as possible.
Right.
And when you go through the priorities, that's in there, but just trying to understand, do we have any additional ads in central office, or have we maintained that philosophy throughout this budget as well?
We have added no positions in central office. We do have a retirement, and that is where some of that savings is coming from. We talked about retirement savings. When I talked about doing some workflow work, that would be done on a grant, and that's through some of the COVID grants. It would be a relatively small cost. And when we look at the savings in terms of time and effort, I think we spend a lot of time dealing with paper in our office, and we're trying to work on some workflow solutions that will help eliminate both paper and handoffs. Our biggest challenge is handoff errors. So for example, when we have a hiring request from a principal, that is by paper, it gets delivered through interoffice mail. It then comes to the office. It's probably touched by 7 or 8 people in our office before it is finally approved. At any given time, it can sit on a desk. It can end up under a pile of papers, what have you. That's just the normal stream of things. We are looking at some workflow solutions to eliminate that so that it becomes automatic. It's, say, a form, an online form that a principal would fill out and attach the requisite items to. It would flow through the proper approvals and be directed to the proper parties along the way. and a human would not touch those. It also keeps us, if we were in a situation where we had to, say, leave the office again, we would not be stopped dead in our tracks like we were in many cases this past year. So that's really the big sort of investment that we're making, the biggest investment. And I don't think it's going to be a monumental investment. We're waiting to see some prices come in.
So second question has to do with technology, right? You spoke technology, and I think we've talked about it previously, but the potential, right, for subscriptions and various platforms that are being used to really grow exponentially, and just want to make sure, and it's not a question, more a comment, that we truly have a robust process that ensures the users are getting what makes the most sense as we look at it from a district standpoint. If we have the opportunity to reduce the amount of programs / subscriptions that we are paying for, that we are doing that. It seems like there's some that are a little bit redundant from your standpoint. So hopefully we've got an evaluation process in there. And then the third one, and it's a minuscule item in a $50 million budget, and I'll be the first to admit it, but it's that heater at the pool that we voted for. I think Bill's was the right way to do it. I guess going back and saying we've secured rental fees for that facility for 8+ years. I don't understand where the rental fee money is going, such that we have to use money from the stabilization fund to pay for a heater that one would think the rental fees that are received for the use of that facility would have the ability to sustain itself versus taking away from potentially some areas of the building that we do not generate any revenue for, that will break and that are far more expensive than a heater, and we're going to have to replace here either proactively or when that unfortunate breakdown happens.
Patrick, we could take it from there as well. I think these are all sort of, pools of money that we can take things from, we can fund things from, and I'm open to taking them from any. I think, my initial comment that we felt we could afford it in the budget was maybe sort of in passing. I mean, there are places we can take it. If we spend it in the budget, then we retain the money in the facilities revolving account, or we retain it in the capital account, but we don't have the money in E&D. If we pay for it in one of those accounts, we then have the money in E&D, but we don't have the money in facilities. I'm open to taking it from anywhere. It was, the intent when I brought it up wasn't really to determine exactly where we took it from, but just to say that I felt comfortable that it was something we could afford one way or the other. And if the school committee wants it to come out from a specific account, I'm happy to take it from a specific account.
No, not saying. I think Bill's proposal is the right way. Just in general, when we look at that line item, right? Line item's 1% of our total budget. So if we can fit more of that to student-facing positions, then the comments we heard from Mark, the comments we heard from Pete during the legislative roundtable, that's spent on programs as opposed to some other areas that maybe we're not using right now. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Patrick, to answer, you had a question 2 in there and jumped into question 3. We started that conversation in February with our leadership team as we sort of built into budget. I did not want to, so we started that conversation. We began making some lists of some tools we're using in a number of different areas. That's been shared with the leadership team in a Google Doc, and we are going to continue expanding on that. And then we're going to have those discussions as we go through the spring. It's something I have not sort of continued. I've left it as an open item just so that we could get through budget, right? We want to get through the budget season, and we know that we can have these conversations as we continue in the spring. So it is our intent, and I didn't mean to stall it, but we will continue those discussions.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely.
I have a quick question, and this might be more for Al than Aaron. How many 5th grade classes do we have slated for next year?
7.
Thank you.
How's that for a brief answer?
That was quick. I didn't have that one, so thank you.
So if there's no more questions from school committee or in the chat, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Kennedy, if I could, please. That's part, oh, sorry, Cheryl, go ahead.
Actually, I believe it's yeah, it's a recommendation that the school committee moves and votes to approve the fiscal 2022 budget in the amount of $50,281,358.
Second. Okay, any discussion? All right, hearing and seeing none, we will take a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
So I know we've done this multiple times in multiple meetings, but I think for the public that's here, especially for our community members that are here, we'd be remiss if we didn't thank Aaron for the work that he's done this budget season. Our principals and directors who normally, when we have our meeting, they'd be sitting in the front row, but they're in Zoom. The town of Wilbraham, the town and town of Hamden, our FinCom boards, our advisory boards, school committee itself, budget sub, and Ronnie Mendoza and Kate Belsky, who have been through this process as well. So thank you, because it's a whole team effort to get to this here point. We still got work to do. We still got our town meetings that will be taking place in May for both Hamden and Wilbraham. But congratulations and thank everyone for their support there tonight.
I was gonna add a weird thing to Ronnie. All right, so,
Congratulations, everybody.
we do have need for the executive session this evening. And we will now the executive session to adjourn. So can I have a motion to
Cheryl, something's going on where it's very hard. Maybe move your microphone closer to your face. There you go. Try it like that.
Thank you.
Actually, Cheryl, they can't hear you, so I'll just read it on your behalf. Is that okay? Okay. Well, why don't you use my my headset maybe, or?
Is it my mic that's giving the problem?
Yep. There's nothing coming through. They cannot hear you.
Is that good?
Al, we normally can hear the feedback between the two of you, so why don't you turn yours on and see if we can't pick up. So Cheryl, we can hear you talking, it's just muffled.
I will try and a little more clear. Executive session pursuant to Mass General Law C-30A, Section 41A-7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, specifically Mass General Law C-214, Section 1B, Massachusetts Student Records Law, Mass General Law C-271, Section 34P, Massachusetts Student Record Regulations 603, CMR 23, etc., and Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, 20 U.S.C. Section 1232G, and 34 CFR Part 99 regarding student transfer requests. Can I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, roll call vote. Maura.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
Bill. Bill,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Cheryl, aye, it is approved. We are in executive session and will come out to adjourn.
So we're gonna wait for Ronnie to get everyone off, and then we'll go into executive session. Thank you, everyone.